Welcome back everyone to Second Wind EDH, this time for deck tech number 6. A lot of the previous deck techs have been about tribal, so this time I'm going to change it up a bit. This deck's all about having multiple combats to cast multiple spells for free and to copy all those free spells. And the commander I chose for this copy deck is ETALI Primal Storm. ETALI is a 6/6 Elder Dinosaur that costs 4 and 2 red with, whenever ETALI Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying its mana cost. It's an incredibly strong effect, but it has one downside of not being able to play lands. But to be fair, if ETALI could play lands, he'd definitely be considered broken. Even though his mana cost is 6, his ability makes it so worth it. So let's move along from the man himself and let's get to the creatures who will get him hitting as soon as possible. The first 5 creatures of this deck are all about giving ETALI haste. Otepic Huntmaster makes dinosaur spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and tap, target dinosaur gains haste until end of turn. Trailblazing Historian also taps and gives another target creature haste until end of turn. Crashing Drawbridge yet again gives a creature haste until end of turn. Urabrask the Hidden is basically an archetype for haste. Just like Archetype of the Imagination doesn't let your opponents have flying and gives you flying, Urabrask gives creatures you control haste, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Last up on the creatures list is Bloodsworn Steward, a flying vampire knight that gives commander creatures you control +2/+2 and haste. Let's move along from the haste and move straight into the copying. Flashing out Dualcaster Mage lets you copy a target instant or sorcery spell, while Feldon of the Third Path lets you pay 2 and a red, tap, and create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except for it's an artifact in addition to its other types, it gains haste, and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Whenever you attack with Delina Wildmage, you get to roll a d20. If you roll a 1 through 14, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of another creature, except for it's a not legendary, and exile this creature at the end of combat. A 15 through 20 lets you roll again. Getting non-legendary copies of ETALI in play is definitely worth it. Whenever Fellhide Spiritbinder becomes untapped, you get to pay 1 and a red, and if you do, you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of another target creature. Except the copy is an enchantment in addition to its other types, and it gains haste, and you exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Now you don't necessarily need to always target ETALI for these token copies, especially if they are legendary. Copying other creatures in this deck will prove to be just as powerful. One of the last ones for this copy list is Flamerush Rider. Whenever he attacks, you get to create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature, and you exile that token at the end of combat. Speaking of combat, let's get a little bit more of that in with these next creatures. Whenever a land enters the battlefield with Morag Fury of Akum out, you get to take an extra combat after the first one. Just like Morag, Karlach lets you untap all your creatures and gives you another attack phase after the first one. Whenever you exert Combat Celebrant, you get to untap all your creatures and you get another attack step. Scourge of the Throne attacks and you're attacking the healthiest opponent, you get to untap all your creatures and give yourself yet another attack step. Portraiser's a little bit different because you have to actually deal combat damage with Portraiser himself to get another combat. And to make him a little bit more balanced, he can't attack a player he's already attacked this turn. All these extra combats will let you exile and cast more and more free things from each one of your opponents. Now let's jump right into how you can use and abuse all those free spells you're going to be playing. First up on the burn list, we have Keeper of Secrets, a 6/4 demon with first strike and haste. That's cool and all, but what we're really looking at is whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Keeper of Secrets deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana value to target opponent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell with Gutter Snipe on the board, you get to do 2 damage to each opponent. Nafalshni is one of the most powerful creatures in this deck, allowing you to copy any spell you play from exile. If it's a permanent card, it gains haste and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Krark the Thumbless lets you copy a spell for each coin flip you win, but if you lose it, it goes back to your hand. Next group up is yet again about copying. Wandering Archaic lets you pay 2 and copy target instant or sorcery spell, while Mizzet Replicator lets you copy target spell, including permanent spells that gain haste, and you sacrifice them at the beginning of your next end step. Now if you play a spell that only targets Zada Hedron Grinder, you can copy it for each other creature that you control that it could target. Wildfire Devils makes your opponents exile an instant or sorcery card in their graveyard that you get to copy without paying its mana cost. Now let's move along to the last 3 creatures. Solemn Simulacrum lets you search your library for a land card, and whenever it dies, you draw a card. Wild Magic Sorcerer gives the first spell you cast from exile each turn Cascade. Combustible Gearhulk is a replaceable card that lets an opponent choose whether you draw 3 cards or mill 3 cards. But if you mill 3 cards, Gearhulk deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. Conjure Torch of Defiance is first up on our Planeswalkers list. First +1 lets you exile the top card of your library, letting you cast it this turn, and if you don't, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Second +1 adds 2 red mana. Her -3 deals 4 damage to target creature, and her -7 gives you an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. Chandra Hope's Beacon lets you automatically copy a target instant or sorcery spell once each turn. +2 lets you add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Her +1 lets you exile the top 5 cards of your library, and until end of turn you may play an instant or sorcery card from among the exiled cards. And her -X lets you deal X damage to each of up to 2 targets. Clothfire Resistance's +2 lets you search your library for a basic mountain card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. His -3 lets you deal damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control. And his -7 has whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, you get an emblem that deals 4 damage to any target. Zariel is yet another haste maker, with its +1 being creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Her 0 creates a 1/1 red devil creature token with whenever this creature dies it deals 1 damage to any target. And her -6 is you get an emblem with at the beginning of your first combat phase in your turn, untap target creature you control. After this phase there's an additional combat phase. We're starting off our enchantment list with both of our star enchantments. Passionate Archaeologist is a legendary enchantment background with commander creatures you own have whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. Double Vision yet again lets you copy the first target instant or sorcery spell you play each turn. Next group of enchantments kick it off with Splinter Twin. Enchanted creature has tap, put a token that's a copy of this creature onto the battlefield. That token gains haste and exiled at the beginning of the next end step. Fervor is a 3-cost enchantment that gives all your creatures haste. Dual Casting lets you pay 1 and copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. And Determined Iteration lets you populate at the beginning of combat on your turn, sacrificing those creatures at the next end step. Let's move straight into our mana rocks. Arcane Signet is replaceable but lets you add 1 mana in any color of your commander's identity. Worn Power Stone and Soul Ring lets you add 2 colorless. And Wayfarer's Bauble lets you pay 2 and tap, sacrifice it, and search your library for a basic land card, putting it onto the battlefield tapped. Now here come the big hitters, aka the star artifacts. Lithiform Engine, Rings of Bright Hearth, and Stronic Resonators are absolute powerhouses in this deck, all letting you pay 2 and copy target triggered ability, aka copying ETALI's ability over and over again. While those are nice, Helm of the Host lets you literally make a copy of ETALI each combat. Next artifact group kicks it off with Swiftfoot Boots, giving equipped creature hexproof and haste. The only thing we're worried about for Hammer of Perforos is giving all your creatures haste. The 3/3s are just a cherry on top. Hexplate Wallbreaker gives you an extra combat each turn, and Lightning Greaves gives equipped creature haste and shroud. Now I honestly would put Mirror Box in the star artifact category, simply because it makes the legend rule not apply to you, and with all those copying creatures you can copy your commander over and over. Knowledge Pool exiles the top 3 cards of each player's library, and whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it. If the player does, he or she may cast another non-land card exiled with Knowledge Pool without paying its mana value. Mind Stone lets you tap for 1 colorless or pay 1 colorless, tap, sacrifice Mind Stone, draw a card. Whisper Silk Cloak makes equipped creature unblockable and with Shroud. Here come the sorceries, starting off with Tormenting Voice. Tormenting Voice lets you discard a card and draw 2 cards. Relentless Assault gives you another combat phase and another post-combat main phase. Mana Geyser lets you add red for each tap land your opponent's control. Blasphemous Act notoriously does 13 damage to each creature. Faithless Looting has a flashback cost and lets you draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Now here come our star sorceries. Seize the Day is an extra combat spell that has a flashback cost, and World at War is yet another extra combat spell, except for it has rebound. Braid is our first instant that lets you choose one, either deal 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. Big Score has you discard a card and then you draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. Bolt Bend is a potential 1 mana redirect that lets you change the target of any single target spell. Thrill of Possibility has you discard a card, but you draw 2 cards. And Chaos Warp lets you shuffle a target opponent's permanent into their library. Last but not least, we have our lands. Myriad Landscape lets you sacrifice it, searching your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Flamekin Village taps for 1 red, but you can also pay 1 red and target creature gains haste until end of turn. Rogue's Passage gives target creature unblockable, and Reliquary Tower gives you no maximum hand size. And last but not least, there are 31 mountains for this copy combat deck. According to MTG Goldfish, the price of this deck comes in at about $185. It's a bit pricey for my taste, but if it's in your budget, it's well worth it. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this deck tech. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to drop a like and a comment below or subscribe to my channel for more. And I'll be sure to see you next time on Second Wind EDH.